Hi guys, Trevor Swenson, back with Hope Through the Darkness, my personal journey with PTSD and trauma and stressor-related disorder. Wanted to talk today a little bit about my experience with partial hospitalization for my PTSD. And I just wanted to cover a few of the things that were very helpful to me. And the reason I wanted to share them as being helpful to me is what was helpful to me could also be helpful to those walking through PTSD outside of a partial hospitalization scenario. And the first thing that I walked away from partial hospitalization with was the importance of vulnerability. And when I talk about vulnerability, I mean the real vulnerability where everybody in the room sees and understands more clearly exactly what you've been through, where you're at, and what you are up against. And being vulnerable obviously is very difficult, and it's difficult being really vulnerable in general, but as a man, it's even more difficult. And I will tell you that one of the interesting things that happened during my partial experience is that I cried for the first time since having to leave my career and leave everything that I had built up until that particular point. And why is that significant? The reason it's significant is obviously there was something very deep happening, very deep work that was happening, and there were a lot of things that hadn't been brought to light that I hadn't been able to verbalize in a professional setting, let alone a setting that had 8 or 10 people in it all of the time. And I found myself being incredibly broken, and some of the feedback from the providers, the professionals that were walking us through the program, is that it's obviously okay. Vulnerability is expected, but it's also deeply celebrated on all levels. And I found it interesting, the things that broke me, that finally broke me, that came to the surface, and maybe some of you can relate to these feelings in life. And the first thing that really broke me was when the providers were able to really hone in on something that I really didn't want to admit or deal with, and that was the safety aspect. So many things tied to my PTSD are experiencing an overwhelming lack of security. And when somebody in the professional healthcare world speaks that out, that is what you are, that's what you are struggling with right now, and that's the overwhelming theme, and it's being masked in X, Y, and Z. It's very powerful, and it really got to a deeper part of my PTSD walk and the understanding of it. The other thing that really broke me is that on my intake and also on my discharge, it was very, very clear to me that I deeply valued and embraced how safe the environment was. And coming from a PTSD background, safety and security obviously are at the top of the list to overcome or to start living out before a lot of healing starts to happen. And I was just overwhelmed as to how safe the environment was. We were working with no less than 8 to 10 different professionals on a weekly basis, and a minimum of 6, sometimes 8 different professionals on a daily basis. And safety is an enormous part of the PTSD picture for me. And the other thing that really broke me is that as people would give me feedback as to what I was feeling and what I saw in myself, as far as being fragile, being meek, being feeling unprotected, things along those lines. The other thing that broke me was the feedback that I got from the group on how they saw me. And it really reminded me of the parallel in my personal walk of faith, that God sees me completely differently than I see myself, and understanding how deeply I'm loved and how deeply I am protected and how deeply I am cared about to a level that it really can't even be put into words is overwhelming. And when you allow that to sink in as to who you are in God's eyes, and that means you, whether you believe in God or believe in Jesus Christ being the Savior of this world, when you really understand how God sees you and how different it is for the better, it really sets you up for healing, because that's what I would feel through those tears were the start of a healing process. The other thing that I wanted to talk about real quickly about the allowing those feelings of sadness and grief and anger to come out in tears. And I'm not talking about a little bit of crying. I'm talking about a lot of crying. When they come out, I will tell you that my biofeedback that I was getting throughout the process would be significantly better after all of that had happened rather than worse. And so blood pressure, blood sugars, resting pulse rate, overall sense of well-being would be better after being completely vulnerable, completely transparent, and then allowing the professionals to work on me and to work with me was unbelievably healing to not only my mind but also to my soul as well. And so it's just another one of those examples that I want to give you, that vulnerability, as difficult as it is so important in starting the healing process in walking through PTSD, and really talking about very specific feelings, those feelings that have been either face masked or suppressed for years. Getting them out in a professional environment, in a safe environment, in a trusting environment is incredibly important. So I just wanted to talk real quickly about the importance of vulnerability and the value in it as I came out of the partial hospitalization program. It's very, very important. So please find help. Ask for help. Get help for your trauma walk, whatever it is, whether it happened years ago, decades ago, whether it happened last week. Make sure that you find professional help, safe help, and process those deep wounds, because that is where healing, a sense of healing, started for me. This is Trevor Swenson with PTSD, Hope Through the Darkness. I can't wait to speak with you next time. Click subscribe, hit the like button. It's great to be here.